Maribel Nocturne pressed her fingertips into her temples, the skin tight against the bone. On her desk, the final notices formed a jagged mountain, their red ink screaming of insolvency. She tapped the calculator keys again. The numbers refused to align. Outside, the carnival churned, the synthetic music and grinding metal of the rides vibrating through the floorboards. She reached for another stack, but the office door slammed into the wall with a force that rattled the frames. Sienna Varel and Mazatron Supreme stepped into the cramped space. They did not wait for an invitation. Sienna marched to the desk and slammed a roll of blueprints down, crushing the tax notices beneath the weight of the paper. She traced a line across the park map with a jagged fingernail. "The park is bleeding money, Maribel," Sienna said. Her voice cut through the mechanical drone outside. Mazatron stepped closer, his shadow pinning Maribel to her chair. He pointed a thick finger at the empty lot by the main gate. "We need a spectacle," he declared. "Something massive. A mall-sized beast that forces them to reach for their wallets. We stop playing it safe. Or we close the gates for good." Maribel looked at the blueprint, then up at them, the reality of the debt settling in. They found Nuareza Pizza Flare in the humid shadows behind the Ferris wheel. The rhythmic scrape of a whetstone against a pizza cutter cut through the ambient roar of the midway. She did not look up immediately, letting the sound hang in the air before she finally met their gaze. Sienna laid out the vision. Nuareza listened, her fingers tracing the edge of the blade, before she offered her own twist. She would not build a standard shop. She proposed a skeleton of exposed pipes, jagged concrete edges, and industrial debris, a site that looked like a ruin before it even opened. The partners hesitated, then agreed. 2 weeks later, the pizzeria stood by the main gate, a calculated disaster of exposed rebar and raw metal. The public did not turn away. They swarmed the site, cameras raised, snapping photos of the industrial ruins as if they were art. The effect was immediate. By the 4th day, the intake records showed profits had tripled. The gamble had paid off. People were paying for the aesthetic of decay, and the park was no longer bleeding. It was gorging itself on the curiosity of the crowd, leaving the trio to plan their next move. Success had made them reckless. Sienna paced the office, her eyes fixed on the mounting cash reserves, while Mazatron drummed his fingers against the wall. The pizzeria was a hit, but it was not enough. They needed a lure that would pull guests away from the rides and keep them trapped at the perimeter. They pushed past the main gate, moving toward the desolate station at the park edge. There, they found Fritera Glazefang standing by a cold, rusted counter. The partners did not negotiate. They simply hauled an industrial-grade fryer into place, hooking it into the park grid with a tangle of heavy cables. Maribel watched as they wiped down the basin, the metal gleaming under the harsh security lights. Fritera adjusted the temperature dials, the internal coils glowing a dull, angry red. The first batch of dough hit the boiling oil with a sharp, violent hiss. A thick, cloying cloud of sugar and scorched grease began to drift across the grounds, heavy enough to taste. It bypassed the usual smell of Carnival cotton candy, cutting through the air like a physical weight. The partners stood back, watching the vapor rise, waiting for the first sign that the park was starting to turn. The scent was a siren call. It hit the midway like a physical blow, thick with burnt sugar and boiling fat. One by one, the mechanical roar of the rides began to stutter and fail. Operators looked out from their booths to find the walkways empty, the crowds having abandoned the Ferris wheels and coasters entirely. Thousands of guests surged toward the park perimeter, a tidal wave of people drawn to the station. The line coiled through the park like a serpent, snaking past the carousel and out toward the gates. Fritera Glazefang moved in a blur, hands rhythmic and relentless, dropping dough into the oil with a hiss that never ceased. The fryer became the heart of the park, a violent engine of consumption. Every customer in the queue clutched coins with white-knuckled intensity, desperate to reach the front. The sound of money hitting the collection bin became a constant, metallic rain. No one looked at the rides. No one looked at the games. The entire park had been hollowed out, its lifeblood redirected into the fryer. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the fryer was still screaming, and the queue showed no signs of thinning. Maribel, Sienna, and Mazatron huddled inside the ticket booth, their eyes locked on the intake bin. The counting machine groaned. a strained, metallic whirring that clawed against the silence of the office. It was meant for daily receipts, not this deluge. Then, the sound changed. A sharp snap echoed from the gears, followed by a violent grinding. The machine shuddered, spat out a crumpled bill, and died. Smoke curled from the display panel. The intake bin was overflowing, a mountain of coins spilling across the floor, burying their feet. Marvel reached out, her hand trembling, and pushed a stack of bills aside. There was no room left for more. She looked at the monitors. The park was completely still. Every ride was frozen. Every stall was abandoned. The entire economy of the carnival had been siphoned into a single, overloaded bin. Sienna and Mazatron stood motionless, their faces drained of color under the flickering neon light. They had built a trap so efficient it had dismantled the park itself. The silence in the booth was absolute, heavy with the realization that they had won nothing but a graveyard of machines. They stared at the jammed counter, breathing in the smell of burnt plastic and cold greed, knowing the gates would never open the same way again.